The Napoleonic Wars had wide-reaching effects around the world. One such place that would feel some of the effects would be Spanish South America. Spain found itself in an awkward position when the French Revolution began, having been a long-time ally with the French. When the first coalition against the revolution formed, however, Spain joined it and fought against the French revolutionaries. After several defeats, however, Spain would withdraw from the conflict in 1795 after a Treaty of Biscay. In the treaty, Spain would cede the eastern two-thirds of the island of Hispaniola to the French. After its loss, Spain would once again continue its alliance with France. Angered by Spain's actions, the British would begin fighting the Spanish at sea, in addition to their ongoing fight against France. As part of the struggle between the British and Spain, attacks were made on Spanish overseas territories in an attempt to weaken the Spanish. Spain's territory in South America presented a tempting target. The Rio de la Plata, in particular, would become a recurring target of British efforts. In June 1806, the first invasion would take place, with the British sending roughly 1,500 men to take Buenos Aires from the Spanish. Initially, the British faced very little resistance as the Spanish viceroy had fled and no significant force of Spanish troops were left to guard the city. The people of the city were also not immediately hostile to the British presence, as there had been a level of discontent with the old Spanish administration. Circumstances would change, however, as general hostility against the British grew, with the merchants, for instance, turning hostile due to the end of the Spanish monopoly of trade. British forces had to be used to maintain control, crushing a small militia that tried to form near the city. Control of the city would not be truly challenged, though, until a force led by Santiago de Liniers, a French officer in service to Spain, led a force of around 1,000 soldiers, along with support from local militias, to retake Buenos Aires. After the Spanish gained control of the entryways into the city, the British would quickly surrender after controlling the city for only 46 days. As a result of the viceroy fleeing the city and Liniers' successful recapturing of Buenos Aires, Liniers was granted military authority by the people, power that was previously held by the viceroy. More militias were also quickly formed around the city and surrounding areas, in case the British decided to attack again, a decision that would soon prove to be wise. The second attempt by the British to gain control of the Rio de la Plata in early 1807 was launched with a combined land and sea attack on the nearby city of Montevideo. Around 5,000 Spanish soldiers and militia defended the city, versus a combined 15,000 British on both land and sea. The city would eventually be taken by the British on the 3rd of February, after bombardment and storming of the resulting breaches by the British. While the defenders put up a brutal resistance, they would eventually be overwhelmed after British troops managed to push through the defenses around the breaches and spread out throughout the city. British forces would eventually also make a second attempt to take Buenos Aires, and met a force led by Liniers outside the city on the 1st of July, where the Spanish were defeated. After defeating the Spanish, however, no move was made to immediately attack the city. Instead, the British commanding officer, Lieutenant General John Whitelocks, repeatedly demanded the city's surrender. No attempt to attack the city would be made until the 4th of July, giving the city's defenders valuable time to make preparations and fortify their positions. Underestimating the defenses of the city and the will of the people to resist, Whitelock eventually divided his 12,000 soldiers into 12 columns and advanced on the city. British forces ran into stiff resistance in the streets of the city, facing a mix of soldiers, militia, and even slaves pressed into the fight. The general populace of the city also joined in, hurling boiling water at the attackers. At the end of the second day of fighting, the British, for the most part, only controlled the outskirts of the city, with the city center still firmly under control of the Spanish. From the 2 days of fighting alone, the British suffered around 1,000 casualties. Fighting would continue until August 12th, when an armistice was finally signed. The British attempt to take the area of the Rio de la Plata had failed once more. British forces would soon after withdraw from all territories they had taken. The invasion had been an embarrassment for the British, the second one especially. Over 1,000 men had been captured, many having deserted during the fighting. Afterwards, a large number of British would be court-martialed, including Whitelock. For the citizens in South America, it was a great victory, but also an important moment that would further the growing desire for independence from Spain. Throughout both invasions, little hope had arrived from Spain, despite requests for assistance. Militia that had been formed to fight the British would remain, along with ever-growing distrust with the Spanish control from across the Atlantic. It would not be long until events would push the distrust to much greater extremes.